I found it on a Sunday. Not because I was looking. I want to be clear about that. I was never the kind of man who went through his wife's things. Never checked her phone, never read her emails, never hovered over her shoulder when she typed. Some people called that trust. Looking back, I think part of it was fear. Fear of what I might find if I actually looked. We'd been married for 9 years. Together for 11. Her name was Claire. And on a Sunday afternoon in October, while she was at her yoga class and I was looking for the spare batteries in the bedroom closet, the kind of mundane, forgettable errand that has no business changing your life, I found a navy blue notebook wedged between a shoebox and the wall. It had her handwriting on the cover. Just one word. Mine. I should have put it back. I know that. Even now, I know that. But there was something about the way it was hidden, not casually tucked away, but deliberately wedged, spine in the darkest corner of the highest shelf, that made my hand stop moving. I stood on the step stool in our closet for a long moment, holding a notebook that wasn't mine, in a house that was ours, listening to the sound of the refrigerator humming downstairs and a car passing slowly on the street outside. Then I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened it. What was inside? The first few pages were ordinary enough. Thoughts about a difficult week at work. A frustration with a friend who'd canceled plans twice. A note about a book she was reading. Her handwriting was small and slanted slightly to the left, the way it always had been, familiar as her face. I almost closed it. Then I turned to a page dated 14 months earlier, and I read a sentence that rearranged everything. I keep thinking about what it would feel like to be truly known by someone. To not have to perform contentment. To stop waking up every morning and putting on the version of myself that fits inside this life. I read it twice. Then I kept reading. I won't reproduce everything she wrote. Partly because some of it is too personal even now, and partly because certain things, once shared, can't be unshared and I'm not interested in that kind of damage. But I'll tell you the shape of it. She had been in love with someone else for 3 years. His name wasn't written anywhere. She referred to him only as him, always lowercase, always that single word, like he existed in a category so specific it didn't need further identification. She described how they'd met. A work conference in Seattle. A conversation that lasted 4 hours at a hotel bar. The way she'd driven home the next morning feeling like a window had been opened in a room she hadn't realized was airless. She described what she felt for him in careful, precise language, the kind of language people use when they've been turning something over in their minds for so long that every word has been weighed and chosen. And then, scattered between those entries, she described her life with me. Not with cruelty. That almost would have been easier. She wasn't vicious about it, wasn't contemptuous. She was something harder to absorb, she was sad. Sad and honest in the way people are only honest when they believe no one is reading. One entry said, "I think I love Marcus the way you're supposed to love the person you married. And I think I married James the way you're supposed to love a good friend. Comfortable. Safe. Familiar. But somewhere between comfortable and dead, I stopped being able to tell the difference." Another, dated 8 months ago. "He made breakfast this morning, the same way he always does, toast slightly too dark the way I've told him I don't like, eggs exactly right because he remembered that at least. And I sat across from him and smiled and said thank you and felt like I was performing in a play that had been running too long. I don't know how to stop. I don't know if I want to stop. That's the part that frightens me most." And near the end of the entries I read that afternoon, one that was shorter than the others. "Sometimes I think he knows. That he can feel the distance and has just decided to accept it because accepting things is what James does. He is so patient. So steady. And I have used both of those things against him without ever meaning to. I think that might be the thing I'll carry the longest." I closed the notebook. I sat on the edge of our bed in the pale October light and I held it in both hands and I breathed. The refrigerator hummed. A second car passed on the street. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and then went quiet. I sat there for a long time. What I didn't do. I didn't throw anything. I didn't call her. I didn't text her best friend, or her sister, or the unnamed man from Seattle whose initial I could have found if I'd been willing to go through her phone, which I wasn't. I didn't cry, which surprised me. I expected to cry. I'd always assumed, in the abstract way you imagine your own worst moments, that if I ever found out something like this, I would come apart at the seams. But I didn't. I just sat there feeling something I can only describe as the sensation of a picture coming into focus, not a pleasant picture, but a clear one. The particular cold clarity of finally understanding something you've been looking away from for a long time. Because here's the thing I haven't told you yet. She wasn't entirely wrong. Not about him. Not about what she felt for him. I have no standing to speak to any of that. But about the performance. About the distance. About two people sharing a house and a bed and a life and somehow managing to miss each other completely. I had felt it too. I'd felt it for probably 2 years, maybe longer, and I had done what she described. I had accepted it. Told myself it was a phase, a season, the natural settling of a long relationship. I'd read articles about how intimacy evolves over time. I'd listen to podcasts about connection and then not applied a single thing I'd learned. I'd made toast slightly too dark and eggs exactly right and sat across the table from a woman who was somewhere else entirely, and I had smiled, and said how was yoga, and meant it as a kindness and offered it as nothing. We had both been performing. The difference was she'd written it down. I put the notebook back exactly where I'd found it. Spine facing in. Wedged against the wall. Then I went downstairs and sat in the kitchen until I heard her car in the driveway. She came in carrying her yoga mat, cheeks flushed from the cold, hair pulled back. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I said. She opened the refrigerator, looked at it for a moment without purpose, closed it again. "Did you find the batteries?" "Not yet," I said. "They might be in the junk drawer," she said, and went upstairs to shower. I sat in the kitchen listening to the water run through the pipes above me and I thought, tomorrow. The last morning. I didn't sleep. Not pretending to sleep, not restless half-sleep. I lay in the dark beside her and stared at the ceiling and thought with the complete, terrible clarity of a man who has run out of reasons to look away. I thought about 11 years. I thought about the night we met, at a mutual friend's apartment in the city, and how she'd laughed at something I said, really laughed, surprised by it, and how that surprise had felt like a gift. I thought about the apartment we'd shared before this house. The one with the radiator that banged all winter and the window that looked out onto a fire escape where pigeons congregated every morning like a small, opinionated committee. I thought about the good years, which were real. I want to be honest about that, they were real. Whatever had eroded between us, whatever distance had quietly grown like a slow tide going out, the good years were not a fiction. We had genuinely loved each other once, in the full, present tense, unreserved way. I had to hold on to that, because without it the whole story became something smaller and uglier than it actually was. I thought about the entry. Comfortable. Safe. Familiar. But somewhere between comfortable and dead. I thought about Marcus. I didn't know his last name. I didn't need to. And somewhere around 4 in the morning, while Claire slept beside me with one hand tucked under her pillow the way she always slept, I made a decision. Not a dramatic decision. Not a revenge decision. Just a quiet, clear, irreversible decision, the kind that arrives not with a bang but with the soft, final click of something locking into place. I was going to let her go. Not because I didn't love her. I'm still not certain, even now, about the exact state of what I felt. But because she was right about one thing, she had been performing. And I had been letting her. And somewhere in the economy of that arrangement, we had both been diminished. Her by the pretending, and me by the accepting. I wasn't going to read her the diary. I wasn't going to sit her down and make her explain herself and watch her cry and listen to apologies that would be real and insufficient in equal measure. I wasn't going to have the conversation where we both say terrible true things and then spend months trying to unknow them. I was going to make her breakfast. And then I was going to leave. The breakfast. I got up at 6. She was still asleep. I went downstairs in the quiet dark of the early morning and I made the best breakfast I knew how to make. Not elaborate, I'm not a complicated cook. But thorough. The good coffee, ground fresh, not the pre-ground stuff we usually used on weekday mornings. Eggs the way she actually liked them. Toast at the right darkness this time. The good orange juice, squeezed, not from the carton. I cut the fruit carefully. She liked it in small pieces, which I'd always known and only sometimes remembered to do. I set the table the way she set it for good mornings. Napkin folded. Small glass of water alongside the juice. Her reading glasses set beside the plate because she liked to read while she ate when she had time. I stood back and looked at it. Then I went to the small desk in the hallway where we kept notepads and pens, and I wrote on a yellow sticky note in my regular handwriting, nothing dramatic, nothing performed. Just the truth, the way she'd been writing her truth in a navy notebook on the highest shelf. I found the diary. I read enough. I'm not angry, I think I already knew. I'm sorry I made the toast too dark for 9 years. I hope he makes it right. J. I put the sticky note on top of the diary. I carried the diary downstairs and set it on the kitchen table, open to the page that began comfortable. Safe. Familiar. I looked at the breakfast laid out next to it. Then I picked up the bag I'd packed in the dark, quietly, while she slept. Just the essentials. Clothes, laptop, my grandfather's watch, the small framed photo of my father I kept on my nightstand. I didn't take much. The house was full of things we'd accumulated together and I didn't feel any particular ownership over most of it. Let it be hers. Let her sit in it and figure out what came next. I picked up my keys. I stood in the kitchen doorway for one last moment. The breakfast was getting cold. The diary was open on the table. The sticky note was yellow and small and said everything I needed to say. I turned off the kitchen light. And I walked out the front door into the cold blue morning and I didn't look back. Clearwater. I drove for 3 hours. No destination, no plan, just the interstate and the early morning light coming in flat and gray from the east and the particular freedom of a man who has stopped waiting for something to get better. I ended up in a town called Clearwater, not the Florida one, a smaller one, inland, the kind of town that doesn't appear in travel articles or on anyone's list of places to visit. A main street with a hardware store, a diner, a library, a bar. A motel on the edge of town with a decent mattress and a window that faced a field. I checked in. I slept for 14 hours. When I woke up it was dark outside and I lay there for a while just breathing, listening to the field, if fields make sound, and I think they do, a kind of low constant presence, the sound of things growing without anyone watching. My phone had 47 missed calls. I turned it off. Building a new life, quietly. I stayed in Clearwater. I know that sounds impulsive. Maybe it was. But I'd been a freelance structural consultant for 6 years, which meant I could work from anywhere with a decent internet connection, and the motel owner, a woman named Bet who had the no-nonsense efficiency of someone who had seen everything and been surprised by nothing, pointed me toward a rental above the hardware store that was cheap and clean and available immediately. I moved in on a Wednesday. The hardware store owner was a man named Doug who was 63, recently widowed, and deeply uninterested in other people's personal narratives. He rented me the apartment, showed me where the thermostat was, told me the pipes knocked in cold weather but it wasn't serious, and went back downstairs. It was the most comfortable interaction I'd had in months. I set up my work from the small table by the window that looked out over the main street. I fell into a routine the way you fall into water, first the shock of it, then the adjustment, then the surprising discovery that you know how to swim. Coffee at 7. Work from 8 to noon. Lunch at the diner, a place called Ruth's, run by a woman who was not named Ruth but had bought it from someone who was and saw no reason to change the name. An afternoon walk. Work again from 3 to 6. Evenings quiet. I read books I'd been meaning to read for years. I went to bed when I was tired. I woke up without an alarm. I called my brother in Colorado after the first week, told him the rough shape of things. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Are you okay?" I said I thought I was getting there. He said, "Good. Call me when you need to talk." He didn't try to fix it. That was the right response. I did not, in those first weeks, think about Claire constantly. That surprised me. I'd expected to be consumed by it, by her, by the diary, by the 11 years and the man from Seattle and all of it. But the grief was less like a flood and more like weather. It came and went. Some mornings I woke up and it was there immediately, sitting on my chest. Other mornings I made coffee and watched the main street wake up and felt something close to peace. I let myself feel both without trying to manage either. What she did. I found out later, through my brother, who heard through a mutual friend, the way information travels in the careful, indirect way of people who are trying to be considerate, that Claire had come downstairs that Monday morning, found the breakfast and the diary and the sticky note, and had not moved from the kitchen table for 2 hours. That she had called my phone 38 times before noon. That she had driven to my brother's house that evening and stood on his porch and asked if he knew where I was. He didn't, I hadn't told him yet. He said she looked like someone who had been turned inside out. That she had called her sister, her best friend, 2 of our mutual friends, all with the same question, "Have you heard from James, do you know where he is he okay?" Not, "I need to explain." Not, "He misunderstood." Just, "Where is he okay?" I think about that sometimes. The specific quality of that question. She knew there was nothing to explain. She'd written it all down herself, in her own careful handwriting, on the highest shelf, and she knew I'd read it, and she knew that what I knew was true. So there was no defense to mount, no version of events to offer. Just, "Where is he?" I heard, much later, that she had not contacted Marcus after I left. That surprised me. I'd assumed, in the distant, theoretical way I allowed myself to think about it at all, that my leaving would free her to go to him, that it would remove the last obstacle between her and the life she'd been writing about in that notebook. But she didn't. I don't know what that means. I've thought about it, and I've come to the conclusion that I don't need to know. Some things resolve into understanding eventually. Others just remain what they are, complicated, human, unresolvable, and the healthy thing is to accept that and move on. I moved on. The letter. 6 weeks after I left, I got a letter. Physical mail, forwarded through my brother. Her handwriting on the envelope. Slanted left, small, familiar. I held it for a day before I opened it. It wasn't what I expected, which I should have anticipated, because Claire had always been better with words on paper than words out loud. The letter was 4 pages, handwritten, and I won't share most of it because it belongs to the space between 2 people who spent 11 years building something together and then had to figure out what to do with the wreckage. But there was one part I've thought about enough that I can tell you the shape of it without violating what it was. She wrote, "The sticky note was the kindest thing you've ever done for me, and I know that sounds wrong because it was also the thing that ended everything. But you gave me the truth of what you knew and you didn't make me perform my way through a confrontation and you didn't take anything from the house that was mine and you made the toast right for the first time and I ate it cold at that table and I cried for 2 hours and I think that breakfast was the most loved I've felt in 3 years. I don't know what that says about us. I think it says something about me." I read the letter twice. Then I wrote back. Not 4 pages. Just 1. I told her I didn't want an apology and I wasn't offering one. I told her I thought we'd both been failing at the same thing for a long time and we just failed in different directions. I told her I hoped she would figure out what she actually wanted and then have the courage to go after it, whichever direction that turned out to be. I told her the eggs had always been easy because she'd told me once, early on, before we were married, over brunch at a place that had since closed down, exactly how she liked them. And I'd just remembered. That was all. I told her I wished her well. That I meant it. I signed it J. I mailed it on a Thursday. I didn't hear back. I didn't expect to. Some letters are endings, not conversations. The divorce. The papers arrived through a lawyer, hers, a practical woman named Sandra who communicated entirely without sentiment and seemed to regard the dissolution of marriages the way a surgeon regards a procedure, important, worth doing carefully, not requiring emotional commentary. I signed everything. No contest, no negotiation, nothing taken that wasn't mine. The house was hers. I'd never quite felt that it was mine in the way she felt it was hers. We divided the rest the way people divide things when the fighting has been done internally and silently and there's nothing left to externalize. The whole process took 11 weeks. On the day the finalization came through, Sandra's assistant sent me an email with an attachment and the subject line, finalized, Clearwater forwarding address. I opened it, read it, closed my laptop. Then I walked down to Ruth's for a late lunch and ate a bowl of soup and read 40 pages of a novel about a man sailing alone across the Pacific, which felt appropriate. Doug, passing my table on his way to the counter, paused and looked at me with the blunt assessment of a man who notices things but rarely comments on them. "You look like you just closed a door," he said. "Yeah," I said. "I think I did." He nodded, went to the counter, said nothing else. That was exactly the right amount of words for the moment. Who I became. Here's the thing about disappearing. Not literally, I wasn't hiding, anyone who needed to find me could find me. But disappearing from the architecture of a life that had been built around someone else's needs and expectations and, yes, someone else's unhappiness. I found out who I was when I wasn't organized around her. Turns out I was someone who liked mornings more than evenings. Someone who preferred cooking real meals to ordering in, which we'd done constantly in the last years because it was easier and easier had become our primary value. Someone who liked long walks without a destination, which Claire had always found vaguely purposeless. I started drawing again. I'd done it obsessively as a kid and had put it away somewhere in my 20s without noticing. I found a sketchbook at the small art supplies section of the hardware store and started drawing the view from my window, the main street, the way the light changed across the day, the hardware store sign with the missing letter that Doug refused to fix because he found it funny. I wasn't good at it. That didn't matter. I joined the informal Sunday morning running group that met outside Ruth's at 7, for people, none of whom asked personal questions, all of whom seemed to understand that Sunday morning running is a form of meditation and should be treated accordingly. A woman named Alice joined the group in January. She taught high school history 2 towns over, had moved to Clearwater after her own quiet reinvention, and had the specific humor of someone who had been through something difficult and had arrived at the other side with her wit sharpened rather than dulled. We started talking after the runs. Then during them. Then at Ruth's over coffee afterward. She didn't try to fix me. She didn't handle me carefully like something that might break. She just talked to me like a person, disagreed with me when she disagreed, laughed when something was funny, and told me once, directly, over coffee on a cold February morning, that she'd been lonely since moving to Clearwater and that she was glad I'd turned up. I told her I was glad I'd turned up too. We took it slowly. Both of us had learned the cost of moving faster than the truth. But it was real. That I knew. 6 months later. I ran into a mutual friend, Derek, someone Claire and I had known since the early years, at a conference in the city in March. He looked at me for a moment like he was recalibrating. "You look different," he said. "Different how?" He thought about it. Like someone turned the volume up. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. He told me, carefully, that Claire was doing okay. That she'd left the job, moved to a smaller apartment, was apparently going to therapy. That she seemed to be working through something. I told him I was glad to hear it. I meant it. He asked if I was happy. I thought about the apartment above the hardware store. The sketchbook on the windowsill. The Sunday runs. Alice's handwriting on the note she'd left on my door last week that said, "Made too much soup. Bringing some over at 7. Say no if you're busy." I wasn't busy. I'd said yes. Yeah, I told Derek. I think I actually am. What I know now. 9 months removed from a Sunday afternoon in October and a navy blue notebook on the highest shelf, here is what I understand. She wasn't a villain. I want to say that clearly, because these stories have a way of sorting people into categories, the betrayed and the betrayer, the innocent and the guilty, and the truth is almost never that clean. Claire was a person who had outgrown something and hadn't found the courage to say so, and had lived inside that silence until it became its own kind of deception. That's not nothing. It caused real harm. It cost both of us years we could have spent differently. But I know myself well enough now to recognize my own part in it. I had felt the distance and chosen comfort over confrontation. I had prioritized the appearance of a functioning marriage over the reality of an honest one. I had made the toast too dark for 9 years because it was easier than asking, every morning, how she actually wanted it. We were both guilty of the same essential failure, we had stopped telling each other the truth. She just happened to write hers down. The morning I made that breakfast and left the diary on the table and walked out the front door into the cold blue light, I wasn't punishing her. I wasn't making a point. I was doing the only thing that felt honest, I was releasing her from the performance. And releasing myself from the audience of it. She wrote that living with me felt like slowly dying. I decided to stop making her suffer. Not dramatically. Not with a speech or a confrontation or a list of grievances. Just with eggs the right way and toast the right darkness and a yellow sticky note and a door closing softly behind me. Sometimes the quietest exit is the loudest statement. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to believe what they've told you about themselves, even when they told you by accident, even when they wrote it on a page they thought no one would ever read. I believed her. I left. And in the leaving, I found something I hadn't known I was missing. Myself. Just myself. Clear and quiet and entirely, finally, mine. Thank you for watching. If this story stayed with you, subscribe. New stories every week. And if you've ever had to love someone enough to let them go, leave a comment. You're not as alone in that as you think.